Good morning, everyone, and welcome to day one of Dreamforce. My name is, yes. Yeah, everybody excited to be here?
Woo! That's more like it. There we go.
All right. My name is Jennifer Bennett, and I am a developer for Salesforce.org. If you're not familiar with Salesforce.org, we were born from Salesforce.com's 111 model. And we are a nonprofit working with other nonprofits, NGOs, higher education, on leveraging the technology. And I personally work on the Nonprofit Success Pack, which is an open source product. And this is my colleague here.
Hey, there's my slide. I'm Laura Meerkatz. I'm also a developer for Salesforce.org, and I work on our employee engagement tools to support our employee engagement programs and grants management. So basically, short version, we have like the coolest job in the world. We get to use Salesforce to do amazing things in the world. So, before we dive in.
This is a slide to remind you to make any purchasing decisions based on what features are generally available today. We will actually have some forward-looking statements in our demo today. We're using a couple beta features. So again, just make your purchasing decisions based on currently available features.
All right, so now let's start digging into the reason you guys are all here. We're going to talk about Lightning Components. It's pretty exciting. We're going to just give you a little quick overview of what the Lightning Component Framework is. We're going to see how Lightning Components can be used, which is really the exciting part for me and the thing that got me up on the stage today. And then we're going to get into the kind of the technical details of what's in a component bundle, what goes into a Lightning component, all of that juicy detail. So before we do all that, little audience participation. Who here has built a Lightning component? Just a few of you. All right, so we got mostly beginners in the house. Pretty excited about that. Who here has used a Lightning component? Hands up. All right, keep those hands up. Now, if you've ever used Lightning Experience or the Salesforce One mobile app, go ahead and raise your hand. Great, so a lot more people. So if you have used Salesforce One or Lightning Experience, you have already used Lightning Components. Lightning Components are built on the open source Aura framework, and that is what those things are all founded on. So congratulations, you are already a little farther ahead than you even knew you were. So what is the Lightning Component Framework? Like I said, it's built on the open source Aura framework, and basically it is JavaScript on the client side and Apex on the server side. So if you've ever done anything with JavaScript remoting, at least the Apex side of this is going to seem really familiar. It is used basically allows you to build components at any level of granularity. So if you have something really specific that you want to reuse, like a special treatment of a field, you can make tiny little components. You can build those into larger components, and you can use them throughout your system. So now we're going to get into the really fun part, and I'm just going to pause on this slide because it's like probably the best slide in the whole deck. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I got excited about this. So this is Visualforce. Oh, I'm not showing this part. Hold on. Technical issues. There we go. That's a little more interesting. Oh, Mike. So this is Visualforce. This is one of the things that I get to work on in my day job, and this is what Salesforce employees use to log their volunteering time and their donations. And this is an Angular app that my team built a couple of years ago. So it's all Angular.js on the front end, and it talks to Salesforce through Apex on the back end, JavaScript promoting. And we love this. And I'm going to click through some stuff just to show you why. It's pretty fast. We can guide our users through. I just selected an organization, I can pick the activity, and like, boom, I'm ready to log my time. Nice and quick. Works great on mobile, works great on desktop, and we love this thing. But there are some challenges with this, and this is where I started to explore Lightning Components. I'm going to pull up, this is basically the detail view of one of our volunteer activities. And anytime we want to add a new field or rearrange something, a developer has to make that change. Like, my admins don't have control over this page layout. And we've got, over here, we've got a nice chatter tab that's going to take a minute to load because it's all coming in through an iframe. And we had to do quite a bit of work to actually get that iframe to look good when you scaled it on different devices. So we have this really great custom experience that is awesome, but it takes a lot of work to maintain. And we're losing out on kind of standard Salesforce features when we're using our custom UI. So we started to look at Lightning components to say, like, will this help us kind of solve this problem? And now I will go back into... So back to the slide. I have to let it go now, but one more time. Pretty cute. So here's what we found when we started looking into Lightning components. And this is kind of the standard set of features that you'll get if you look at the documentation. But my favorite things about this are that you really get to leverage standard Salesforce features alongside any of your custom UI that you really want to build out. You can use this, and this was, I wasn't sure about this when I started exploring, but you can actually use this in Lightning Experience, or with Lightning Out, you can continue to support users who are using Salesforce Classic. That was important for us. And when you're using this with Lightning Design System, you get these components that look great in Lightning Experience, Salesforce Classic, mobile, everywhere. So, let's actually look at a Lightning component. That's what you came for. I'm going to kind of show you what got me excited about this, and hopefully it gets you excited too. So up on the right here, this is a Lightning component that's in the area box. This is, if you look at Trailhead, this is the restaurant locator app with a little extra bling that I've put on it for myself. So this is a nice little context-aware component that is communicating with the Yelp API. So if I want to see some sushi, I can do a little search there. And right now this is context-aware, so you can see that we're showing results for the contact that we're currently looking at. And that's pretty cool. It knows that just by the fact that we're on this record. Little bonus, as of winter 17, you can also do these as quick actions. So if you don't want to have it right there on your page, you can have a nice little pop-up. All right, so let's say that I want to take that Lightning component and I want to use it for accounts. So let's pull it in to our page layout. I'm just going to go up to Setup and select Edit Page. And to use this component that we built out, all I have to do is take this in the area component and drag it onto my page. But we actually have a couple of other options off here on the right. We have exposed a couple of variables as design variables in our component, which means that an admin who's editing this page can actually go in here and change the default search and say for accounts, we want to know what hotels are in the area. And just like that, we're now looking at hotels in this context only. All right, so next up, let's take a look at what this looks like in Salesforce Classic, because like I said, it's really important to be able to support users who are not yet on Lightning Experience. So in this context, we have the exact same app. This time it's running, since we're running this as a standalone app, we're showing results for our location, and we're doing this using Lightning Out. And then the last piece, for those of you who are working with communities, you can also just drop your Lightning components into Community Builder. And if I preview this, you can see we can even set this up so that we are interacting with our components using the main search bar. So that takes a little bit of configuration, but it's a pretty cool option to have. So to take this back to my Visualforce experience, what this means for me as a developer is that I can really focus on the parts of my app that I care about. I can continue to give my users a great experience, and I can leverage all of the other standard Salesforce features without a whole bunch of extra work to wire them together. All right, Jenny, over to you.
Okay, so another poll. How many people have built a Visualforce page? All right. So you may be wondering, what is the difference between Visualforce and Lightning, especially if you've built maybe some Visualforce components, right? So it's definitely Visualforce components are awesome. Visualforce is not going anywhere anytime soon. They're great. But there is a couple big differences that come to mind for me is With Visualforce, it's page-centric, and it was built with the desktop in mind, right? And so users kind of navigate page to page to kind of accomplish their tasks. And what's happening is the page is being sent out to the server, being rendered server side, and then sent back to the client. With Lightning components, we have more of an app-centric model. It's often referred to as a single-page application or a SPA. And it was built, as Laura mentioned, for Salesforce 1. So it was built mobile first. And your rendering is occurring, it's JavaScript rendering, and it's occurring client-side, which is going to give you faster response. So one of the things that you'll often hear is bundles, right? We have Lightning component bundles, we have application bundles. A bundle basically is a folder, right? It's a folder for your base component along with its optional resources. So we have, let's see, we have the application, component, interface, event, and token bundles. Those are all the different types of Lightning bundles. The ones that we're gonna focus on today are gonna be more of the Lightning component bundles. So now we're gonna just kind of take a look at how to get started with building a Lightning component. We do recommend going into the developer console when you're first getting your feet wet with building Lightning components, and you'll see why momentarily. If we go up to File, and then New, we have the option for our different bundles, and we're gonna start with Lightning component. And of course, what good intro is without its hello world, or hello Dreamforce in this case. Awesome, we just created a bundle. We created our Lightning component bundle, and you'll see on the right-hand side, there's these little tabs that allow you to automatically create and auto-wire additional resources to your component. So like if we were to click on the controller there, you'll see now we have our Hello Dreamforce controller.js. The system did that for us. It's auto-wired, and it's part of that bundle or in that folder structure. So if we go back to the component itself, you could do as simple of a component as just adding some HTML markup here. Now, once we save this, we want to be able to preview it. But with Lightning components, the best way to preview your work in progress is to create an app wrapper. So we're just going to go ahead and repeat that process. And this time we're doing a Lightning application. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to plug our component inside of our application. And we do that with the C colon. The C is because we don't have a namespace configured in our org. If we did, it would be a namespace colon. Or you may be familiar with Aura colon or Force colon, the other namespaces that are available for components. And once we save that, you'll notice one difference on the right-hand side. You'll see that there is a preview button. And this allows us to quickly preview our app in action. Voila, we just created a bundle live. So,
pretty exciting.
Yeah, exciting stuff, right? All right. So now let's take a look at another application that can be used in your everyday type studying. What I like to do is what's known as, what is often referred to as Salesforce life hacks. And I try to play with the new functionality or new releases in developing something that can be used in everyday application. So if we want to just jump back into the, we'll take a look at the
snowman.
The snowman. Isn't he cute?
Obviously.
He's winking. He's happy. So here we have a study time or a flashcard app. And what we could use this app for is I could help my daughter study for her math test, right? Simple flashcard. 5, anybody? Awesome, 25. I don't have any like rewards, right? Cool, so why don't we go ahead and dive into some of the code behind this. If we actually take a look at the flashcard container, and we'll click on that, component, and we'll see right away we have the outer Aura component tag. And that's kind of like the difference between the different bundles. You'll notice that there's the Aura component, and then the file name ends in .cmp. And here we have a couple of attributes being set. We have our controller attribute. Now, remember I said that resources are auto-wired, except for the case of server-side controllers. We need to tell our component what controller we want to use. So here we have the flashcard controller, which is actually an Apex controller. And Laura, if you don't mind, why don't we just go ahead and quickly jump into that Apex controller. Just a couple things to note is your methods in your Apex class will need to be static, and you're going to have that Aura enabled attribute in the beginning. And that makes your methods accessible to your Lightning components. And basically, this is just a query returning the flashcards to the component. So we'll jump back into the flashcard container component. And then the next one where we have implements, we have two different interfaces here. The one that Laura showed us earlier, what enabled us to use it as a quick action, is the new force-based Lightning quick action without header. And obviously, there's actually another one that doesn't have without header, which means it has a header. And then there's Force App Postable, which allows us to put it into a Lightning component tab. So there's the different interfaces that you can use depending on where you want to use your components. Next down on lines 4 through 5, you'll see I commented this out. And that's because in Winter 17, if you're using your component within like Lightning Experience or Salesforce 1, you're going to get the SLDS static resource included now, which is awesome. And again, that's a Winter 17 release. So we went ahead and commented that out. In certain situations, you will need to, I believe it's the Force SLDS, you'll need to extend that if you're using it as a standalone app. In Lightning Out, it will be available automatically, but you do have the option to unstyle as well. So further down, you'll see we have an attributes section. And attributes are very similar to Apex class variables. And they, they're typed attributes, meaning, you have your basic primitive types, you have your S object type, you can actually do Apex classes, you can do other Aura components in your attributes. And then there's the access, whether or not it should be public, private, or global. And here we just have a list of flashcards and the category select options. In the next section down, we have our handlers. So on line 12, you'll see there's the init handler. And that one's actually provided to you by the framework. And when your component is initialized, but before it's rendered on the page, this init event happens. And you'll see when that init event is handled, we call our controller. And this is our client-side controller. We're only going to be able to communicate with our client-side controller through our component markup. And this one is calling a doInit function. In line 13, this is a custom event that we're handling. So we have the flashcard event. Again, you're going to see the C:, because I don't have a namespace. If I had a namespace, that would be there before the colon. And the name of our event is important. This is a component event, so we need to make sure that we register and handle our event with the same name. And why don't we go ahead and just, while we're talking about events, we'll take a look at that flashcard event. And this is a very, very simple event. Basically, I just wanted to know when the event occurs. I don't need to pass any attributes or any information along. I just want to say, hey, anybody listening to me, this happened. And one thing you'll notice about the Aura event is that it is the type of component. And there's the option of an application event or a component event. An application event is more like a shout out. So like anybody within the application can listen to it. Whereas a component event is more tightly coupled, meaning that it's only going to be able to talk to its parents and its parents' parents. It kind of bubbles up through the hierarchy that way. And if we take a look at the flashcard itself, we can see where we actually registered this event. So we take a look at line 9, we can see we're registering event, again, the exact same name that we're handling, and the same type, right? It's our custom flashcard event. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is we were talking about events bubble up to the parents and the parents and the parents, right? I don't know about you, but children components are kind of like human children, and they don't listen, right? You need to kind of give them well, they sometimes listen. My daughter, not so much. They sometimes need a mechanism for listening. So what our flashcard component, our child component is doing is registering a method. And this is kind of like an API for your component. And it says, hey, if you want me to do something, this is how you're gonna get me to do it. Sounds familiar, at least in my case. So here we created a method called reset cards. And that allows our container component to get a reference to that method and then call it. And there's the action there of reset. So we'll take a look at the registered event and how we registered that event in the controller. Okay. This is actually, let's go to the flashcard. That's okay, the flashcard controller. All right, so just one thing to keep in mind, I like to just keep my controller strictly to the actions that they're performing. So it's a way for my component to, or my markup to call the controller. Most of the stuff that's happening is actually in the helper method itself. So if we look at the helper.setCard, that's gonna be our reset method. And then if we look at our clear, helper.clearCard, that is gonna be where we fire our event. Okay. So the first one, like I said, the set card is basically just saying, okay, I got a new list of flashcards, and I'm going to grab that first flashcard and put it in. So I'm setting that flashcard in there. And then if we scroll down, we can see the clear card. And this is where we're actually firing our event. So in the clear card event, we get a reference to that event by the name, right? We gave it a name. So we said component get event. We grabbed that. And then we cleared out the flashcards, and then we fired our event. And then that's where the flashcard controller is going to handle that, or flashcard container is going to handle that. So if we take a jump back into the flashcard container. Okay, so now we've seen events, we've seen how we handle them, we've seen how we register them. We'll take a look at the markup in the next section here. Now you'll see a new namespace. We have the Lightning components. These are new Lightning-based components, again, released in Winter 17. What is really super awesome about these new components is that they have the SLDS kind of built in right inside of the component itself. So if you've actually started, I saw a couple hands up with developing the Lightning components, this is gonna kind of keep your markup nice and clean. I really like it. It does all the heavy SLDS lifting for you. So we're just using a couple of those, and you can see to iterate over a list, kind of like your Apex repeat, we have Aura iteration. And that's just grabbing our list of categories that we got from the server and displaying them, so for a pick list option. And then in the next section on line 24, we actually have the flashcard component itself. Now remember, that's the child component that has its method, it's registering events. This is how we included it in the markup, again, C:, flashcard. And then we're setting the attributes. We're passing in the flashcards that we want our child component to use. And we have an Aura ID. That's a local ID for your markup. And what that allows you to do is actually get a reference to that component and fire that child method. So why don't we actually, while we're looking at that, we'll jump in to see how you fire that method.
So we're looking at flashcard?
Oh, I'm sorry, into the flashcard container where we.
Yep, sure thing.
Yeah. And we'll go right into the helper.
Great.
Okay. All right, so actually when we handle our events, kind of jumping around here, I apologize. I just noticed that at line 14 at the bottom there. Here we are. Going back to where we handled that event, you can see that when we had an action on our handler that says, when I get this event, I want to close the flashcards. And basically, it's again, by finding by the Aura ID, component.find categories, and it's just clearing out the value. So pretty simple. It's just a way of communicating back and forth. But if we go back up, when we have a category selected, we're going to go and retrieve the flashcards, but we need to let our child component know that those flashcards were retrieved. So we do that. Again, I'm going to back up a second here. On line 16, we're going to find the categories, and we're going to get the value from it. So whatever value you selected from the iteration, we're going to get that value. And then we're going to, you see where we have on line 17, I'm pointing here, I should be pointing there. Line 17, we have the action. This is how we're actually going to get our method from our Apex controller. So we have a category selected. We know what category we want. We're going to grab our method from the Apex controller, which is called get flashcards. And then we're going to set the parameter on our Apex method, which is the category. So we don't want all flashcards. We just want the ones related to the category we selected. And then we're going to say, hey, after this action is done performing, we're going to set the callback. This is what I want you to do. I want you to grab the response. I want you to make sure that the response is valid. And if it is, I want you to take that return value, set it into my flashcards variable. Then I want you to find, on line 25 there, you're going to find a reference to our flashcard component by the Aura ID. And now we're going to take that and we're going to set the flashcards in there. And here, flashcard component, where we just found that earlier, we're going to reset the cards. So that's how you call the method on your child component. And then down below, you'll see that the action is enqueued, and that basically the framework is going to queue that up for you so that you're not making multiple trips to the server. So with that, I think we can just real quick jump back into the flashcard component itself, and we'll take a look at one more thing. If we scroll down, you'll see I'm using a mix of the Lightning-based components, like the new Lightning icon. That gave us the icon on the flashcard. And we're also using some custom CSS. So if we scroll a little bit further down, to lines 38 through, I guess, 48 or 49. This is where we're styling our flashcard. So with Lightning components, you have the option of including a style resource. And if we go ahead and click on that style resource, what I did here is I actually just went out to the web and I said, hey, give me some CSS for flashcard. And I said, give me some CSS for paper. And I just plopped that in. But the biggest thing that I needed to change, or the most important thing to change here, is the this prefix. And what that does is allow you to encapsulate the CSS to your component. It allows you to kind of protect your component from other clashing styles. So it basically is an instance of your style. And all of your regular CSS style, your spacing and everything is respected here. So with that, I guess we can jump back into the slides for a quick recap.
Great.
So again, our component is going to consist of an application or a component bundle, and that's going to be your view, right? And then your optional resources like your style, which is your CSS. Your renderer, we didn't talk much about that, but you do actually have the option of overriding the default renderer before the renderer, the after renderer, and I believe after unrenderer. And that renderer can also use your helper. So that's why it's important to keep some of your business logic in that helper, because it's reusable by the things within that component. And then your controller also can make a call out to your helper. And then you have the option of calling your Apex controller either through the controller or the helper. And then you have your other resources like your design, your SVG, and your documentation. The design resource is what Laura showed us, allowed us to use hotels in the area app versus restaurants, right? It took that attribute and it put it out to our app builder so that the admin had a little bit more control over what was populated there. The SVG is what's going to give you an icon. So when you're dragging and dropping your component onto your Lightning app page, there's a nice little icon that you can put to the left of your component to kind of brand it. And the documentation is pretty awesome. Like, all of your orgs have Aura documentation built in. So if you have Lightning components, you can see sometimes examples, which attributes are global or available to use. And that's all done through that documentation. So if you're building Lightning components, it's a great way to help end users know examples or whatever of using your component.
All right, so we just covered a ton of material, and we know that. It's a lot to look at initially. But the main takeaways here, Lightning components are flexible and reusable, so there's gonna be a learning curve coming up to speed with this, but the benefits that you get out of it are amazing. You can use them in Lightning Experience if you have users there, and you can support your users in Salesforce Classic. You can mix out-of-the-box components with your own codes, so we get more and more of those all the time, like the lightning tags that Jenny showed that are new to Winter 17, and so you get more things coming out of the platform. You can get components from the component exchange, and you can use your own components in different places. You can mix Lightning Design System and your own styles, like we just saw in that Style tab. And even if you don't usually write code in the developer console, starting from the developer console is really great when you're working with Lightning components because it does automatically generate all the different pieces of your bundle for you, and it kind of helps you keep things organized. So here's my second favorite slide. Just to reinforce all of those things that we just talked about, we're going to go back to our flashcard app. We're going to do a little quiz. Yay. Oh, I have to actually pick the right one. That helps. So, I didn't actually mention this part yet, but I bet you can guess. We're going to go learn more about this. There's a ton more to learn. I would start by going to the Lightning Lookout downstairs in the Trailhead Zone, and there are, I think I counted at least 20 sessions about Lightning components this week, so hopefully we've given you a good foundation or, started to get you a little confused and you can get a little more clarity in certain parts later with some of those other sessions. So let's flip that. Look at that. And if you can also use the Lightning Component Developer Guide, obviously. And Trailhead is always a great resource. When you go home, you can start working on those projects yourself. Where can you find a tutorial on building the Restaurant Locator app? If you saw that Yelp app and thought, man, I really want that in my org. I want to know where I can get sushi near all of my clients. Same answer. You can go into Trailhead to get that, and that project is completely available to you, so you can use that as a way to get started in your own development and end up with a great app in the end. And this is the big one. This is all of the things that I showed you. Where can you use Lightning components? Who remembers all of them? I'm not going to look. I'm not going to cheat. We got Lightning Experience, Visualforce through Lightning Out, Quick Actions in Winter 17. Yep, we said Visualforce and Classic.
I think I heard community out there.
We got communities. Awesome. You guys are totally paying attention. I love it. Thank you. And actually, we didn't mention, but Lightning Out will even allow you to use your Lightning components on Heroku or in a web app that is not hosted in Salesforce. There are other considerations there for security, obviously, but you can use Lightning components all over the place. So with that, I believe we're ready for questions.
It's really quick. The code for the flashcard, are we able to have access to that? It's pretty elegant. It's nice. The Trailhead I thought was got a little complex for being.
Sure.
Yours is a little bit more easily readable. Is that going to be available?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the question was, will the code for the flashcard app be available?
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll put that out on GitHub, and then we'll post it out to the chatter link.
Awesome. We got one over here and one over there. Let's see.
What should be the what should be the right plan to migrate the tons of Visualforce pages we have currently? What's the right approach? Like, should we switch it to the Lightning experience and start developing, or migrate Visualforce into Lightning and use Classy? What's the exact plan that we should have?
That's a really good question. So the question was about migrating Visualforce pages into Lightning components, and I actually believe I saw a session that I think was later today that is on that exact topic. So I would go check that one out.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, can it really depends. Yeah. Hello? Yeah. All right. It really depends on your situation, on what path you're going to take. So that migration is a really awesome session because it kind of breaks down all the different ways that you can make that migration. You know, there's parallel where you're developing in both. There's also use cases. It depends on where you're using the Visualforce and things of that nature. So like Laura said, I definitely recommend that migrating. And actually, I think the session speaker also blogged on it. So if you can't make the session, just look up migrating to Lightning components. I'm not sure.
I'm not 100% sure. I think it
if
might
you
have
want to
been, but-
stay after, I can take a look on the agenda.
All right. Got a couple more.
Okay.
So you showed that slide with like all of the different components of the component, and one thing that I get kind of hung up on is the controller and the helper are both JavaScript, and I have a hard time like separating in my mind which one should do what. So if you could just say like, here's generally what I want to do in a controller, and this is what it's for, and then here's what the helper is for, and when I would use.
Yeah, ultimately it's kind of a style question, so it's a best practice to go ahead and separate things out, but you can think of it the same way when you're separating code out from a trigger. It is best practice to put all of that logic into a separate class and call it from the trigger. Similarly, it's best practice to put it into a helper and call it from the controller. There aren't a lot of constraints that will force you to go one way or the other. But you know what Jenny showed is really a great practice, which is just kind of keep as much logic as you can in the helper and just call that from the controller. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, just one other thing to keep in mind is that your helper is reusable. So you can actually call helper dot and then another function within your helper, whereas in your controller, you cannot reference your own controller. So if you do need that reusability within your component, you're going to want to put that logic into that helper. And also, you're not going to want to call your JavaScript controller from your renderer. So if you need to do any custom rendering, you're going to want to put that into a helper.
We got one in the back there that it's a little harder to see from your angle.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think, well, I'll go ahead and there. Okay.
Actually, like I have a question as well a recommendation. So let me first go over the recommendation. The recommendation I would provide from this session is, so basically if there is a pictorial representation of how we are doing this, basically, I mean to say you showed me a helper class. I understand the design patterns of it, like you properly followed the best practices, everything, but when I have to look into the code, it's like hovering between the lines, we kind of tend to get lost on what we are looking into. So cap on what the presentation layer or the architectural design, a pictorial representation would definitely help us in more clear understanding. Person whose day-to-day job is this can clearly understand, but people who are thinking to learn how to use a component into a Lightning component would find it tough time. That is one small recommendation I have. Yeah. The second question I have is like a business scenario. In my case, like where I need to use the Visualforce remoting because I need to bring in chunks of data. Probably we were debating about going to Heroku to do this, or use the Lightning components to render the data into the UI, because like it's a huge set of data where I cannot rely on Apex because I would hit corner limits. So I have to use Visualforce remoting with parallel chunking to show the data. So would you recommend this practice, meaning where I wanted to Visualforce remoting and doing chunking of data and providing a presentation layer, can we use components for that, Lightning components for that?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I would think there's a way to do that. I know they have like there's word storage and things of that nature. I know you can use combination of
basically on the helper class, when I saw you are following a JS pattern, right? JavaScript, end of the day. And Visualforce remoting is again, like you're going to use JavaScript to call Apex method, which you are doing there through your component calling an Apex method, which you are doing it, right? So do you think, what I mean to say is, would this handle the load? That's what my question is.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know.
All right.
So, but I think there's some really deeper dives into Lightning components, and there's also some Lightning component roadmap sessions here. So I would maybe take a look into that, and they might be able to better answer your question. Or if you want to, I can give you my card after, and you can shoot me an email, and I'll follow up with you on that. Awesome, great, thank you. Yeah. I'm gonna go there and there. Thank you.
Hey, so right away, you guys said that when you're defining your controller, all the methods must be static, right? Now, I'm curious, is that a limitation of the platform? And then second of all, what happens if you need to have access to instance variables that might be associated with your controller? Are there any, you said something about you use those attributes, right? But, I mean, those seem like very primitive data types. I don't exactly know. I'm having a tough time drawing an analogy of how you would do something like store an instance variable and reference it in a controller method, and then that kind of piggyback, is that a limitation of the framework, or is that just a best practice?
I'm not sure if it's, I don't know, I think it's by design. So basically your component is more like your design or your class, and then when you use your component on the markup, that's an instance of that component. So that's why the server trips is basically just getting some JSON and it's getting some back, and then it's getting rendered client side. So as far as it being a limitation, I think it's by design, just for the way that the nature that it was.
All right, great. And Jenny, we are at time.
Oh.
Sorry, that was really loud. Thank you to the 10 of you who are left. It was lovely talking to you today. I hope you enjoy your Dreamforce and your journey with learning Lightning components.